That day, I was in the hospital delivery room, about to open a new door in my life. Sweat beaded on my forehead, and the rhythmic waves of pain left me breathless. Beside me, my mother gripped my hand tightly, encouraging me over and over. You can do it. And then, in what should have been the most vulnerable and sacred moment of my life, it arrived. My smartphone, resting by my pillow, emitted a cold, mechanical notification sound. Could it be from Joey? My mother wondered aloud as she glanced at the screen, then froze. Her expression alone told me everything. When she handed me the phone, I saw the image of a hotel suite bed. And there, where they should never have been, were two people, my husband Joey and, smiling beside him with a look of triumph, my own sister Kristen. Beneath the photo was a message, dripping with malice, as if it embodied her entire personality. I've claimed a real estate king who owns 3 buildings to be my husband. Best of luck, single mom. She had chosen this exact moment, when I was physically and emotionally at my weakest, to strike. During her own sister's childbirth, she slept with her husband, sent photographic proof, and tried to break her spirit. It was the work of a devil, unthinkable to an ordinary person. My mother was so shocked she couldn't speak, only watching me with worried eyes. But strangely, what escaped my lips was not a scream or a sob. It was laughter, uncontrollable laughter bubbling up from deep inside me. The mix of labor pain and laughter twisted my stomach until I thought it might tear, because my foolish sister had made the biggest mistake of her life. That message Kristen sent me was not evidence of betrayal. To me, it was proof of her grand delusion, an unmistakable declaration of war. She thought she had seized a diamond castle and claimed its king, not realizing the castle was only a movie set and the king was just an extra. The thought was so absurd I couldn't help laughing. Looking back, my relationship with Kristen had been warped for years. Since childhood, she had been both my imitator and my rival. If I got a new dress, she would throw herself on the floor, wailing until she was given a flashier one. If I began piano lessons, she would claim she was closer to Chopin's soul and join the same class. She always mimicked what I did, always desperate to outdo me. Our father passed away from illness when I was 18, and my mother raised both Kristen and me alone, working tirelessly. She was always the buffer between us. You two can't be compared. Tracy has her own strengths, and Kristen has hers. She would patiently repeat those words. But despite my mother's hopes, Kristen's relentless rivalry never ceased. As the years passed, her competitiveness toward me grew into something more vicious, more calculated, a festering jealousy. While I graduated from university and began working at a financial consulting firm, carefully building a steady career, Kristen lived a flashy lifestyle, partying with friends night after night. A few years later, at a work-related party, I met Joey. He was the opposite of quiet, reserved me, radiant like the sun, charismatic, always at the center of attention. Yet, we were drawn to each other like magnets. He never dismissed my quiet nature as boring or shy. Instead, he saw it as part of my charm. Even as he welcomed me into his dazzling world, he respected and tried to understand my smaller, quieter one. That was what slowly melted my heart. As our relationship deepened, he began sharing stories of his business. He had started his real estate venture in a tiny apartment. He spoke of the struggles of securing funding, the thrill of landing his first deal on his own, and how he eventually came to own several commercial buildings in Manhattan. He was a man who had built an empire from nothing, full of passion and talent. And above all, he was someone extraordinary who had chosen me, quiet, unassuming me, from among the crowd and loved me wholeheartedly. I was genuinely moved by his success story and decided to introduce him to my family. My mother was delighted by Joey's sincerity and the way he cherished me. Kristen, on the other hand, changed the moment she heard about his business and wealth. Though she was already dating someone else at the time, Joey's status as a real estate king reignited her competitive fire. But unlike Kristen's attitude, our relationship blossomed. In a luxurious restaurant, Joey proposed to me. At our engagement party, Kristen muttered loud enough for me to hear. So, Tracy, you finally bought love with money. Congratulations. But even her bitter remarks couldn't dampen my happiness. To her envy-twisted eyes, it must have looked as though I had finally secured the ultimate trophy she could never obtain for herself. At my wedding, Kristen sulked the entire time, downing glasses of champagne worth hundreds of dollars each as if it were water. She had always seen only the surface of things. And without realizing it, that blindness would become the greatest failure of her life. After the marriage, Joey flaunted our luxurious lifestyle across social media, popping champagne aboard private jets, showing off a garage lined with exotic cars, invitations to parties filled with celebrities from around the world. I never cared for that sort of display, but Joey would say with excitement, "This is part of business branding. It's necessary." So I stayed silent. Soon, I was carrying a new life inside me, and from the outside our marriage looked perfect. Joey, too, seemed more devoted to his work than ever, claiming it was all for our baby. But as the due date drew closer, his nights away grew longer, and he often disappeared on so-called urgent business trips. And then came the day labor started. I called him over and over again, but the line never connected. Terrified of giving birth alone and weighed down by the loneliness of my husband's absence, I went to the hospital with only my mother by my side. And there, in the delivery room, came Kristen's message. A moment where any normal woman might have collapsed in tears, but to me, it was almost funny. "Tracy?" My mother peered at me, worried. But my laughter wouldn't stop. I felt sorry for speaking ill of my child's father, but I still said, "Don't worry, Mom. Kristen's the best comedian there is. She should start a duo act with Joey." A few days later, I safely gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Nicole. Barely recovered, I began taking action. I contacted Mr. Watson, my attorney, and instructed him to initiate divorce proceedings against Joey and to file for his immediate removal as company representative, both at lightning speed. And then came the day of reckoning. We sat across from Joey and Kristen at Mr. Watson's law office, separated by a heavy mahogany table. The two of them sat like a triumphant king and queen, exuding confidence. Kristen clung to Joey's arm in an exaggerated show and, loud enough for me to hear, cooed, "Hey, sweetheart, once this is over, let's go to Tiffany's. I want a ring bigger and shinier than the one my sister got." Joey, far from displeased, gave me a pitying look, as though I were the tragic wife about to be stripped of her dignity and blood dry in divorce. They thought I would play the role of the humiliated woman begging for compensation. Suppressing my laughter, I opened calmly. "Thank you both for coming today. Let's get straight to the point. Joey, I am formally filing for divorce." Joey sighed theatrically. "Tracy, I'm sorry. I regret hurting you so deeply. As for compensation, I'll make sure you have more than enough to live comfortably for our daughter Nicole's sake, the precious fruit of our love." The phrase, "fruit of our love," from his lips nearly made me sick, but I didn't let a flicker show. "Yes, compensation is important. Kristen, listen carefully too, since this will affect your future. First, there's the commercial building on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Current value, considering inflation, roughly $50 million. Did you think that was Joey's asset?" Kristen smirked proudly. "Of course. What about it? Next, the vast Napa Valley estate with its winery, about $30 million. Then the bright red Italian sports car you've been driving, the private jet membership, the securities account at a Swiss private bank. Altogether, the total assets exceed $100 million. Quite something, Joey. You really do look the part of a real estate king." As I read off the list, I glanced between their faces. They were lost in visions of their glittering future, gazing at me with dreamy satisfaction. And that was when I dropped the decisive blow. But unfortunately for you, none of those assets legally belong to you. Not even a single cent. Silence fell. Joey's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Don't play games with me." At that moment, Mr. Watson, who had been sitting quietly at my side, slid a thick stack of files across the table. Joey, this is the prenuptial agreement you signed with Tracy regarding asset management. Please read Section 7B. The position of Joey as representative director is contingent solely upon the continuation of his marriage to Tracy. Should the marriage be dissolved, Joey will be immediately removed from this position and shall have no rights to any company assets whatsoever. Your signature is clearly visible here. Then he produced document after document. And here are the official property registers and ownership certificates for all the assets in question. Every single one is either owned by the corporation or by Tracy personally. In other words, none of it is subject to marital division. The amount you receive is zero. Joey's face turned ghostly pale as he grabbed the documents with trembling hands. Kristen, equally stunned, shook his shoulder in disbelief. What is this? This has to be a lie. Explain it right now. Watching the despair spread across their faces, I delivered the final blow, slowly, clearly, and without hesitation. Do you want to know how things ended up this way? I asked, my voice laced with pity. Kristen, you always thought of me as nothing more than your boring older sister, working at some dull financial company after college, right? And yes, that was true for the first few years. But what you never knew is that I used our father's inheritance to start investing in real estate on my own. I built assets far beyond anything you two could have imagined, all by myself. Yes, I had a secret. A few months after Joey and I got engaged, one day at his house, I stumbled across an envelope he had left behind. It was a court notice of overdue payments. That discovery led me to dig deeper into his background, and what I found left me stunned. The real estate empire he bragged about so passionately didn't exist. The buildings he claimed to own were lies, fabrications to impress others. In reality, Joey was drowning in debt from multiple lenders, living day to day under the weight of repayments. His glamorous lifestyle was nothing more than a castle built on sand, propped up by borrowed money. Of course, I felt the sting of betrayal. But what lingered even more was a kind of pity for his weakness. He could only survive by pretending to be a successful man. I considered breaking off the engagement. But instead, I chose another path. While working as an employee, I had already begun quietly investing in real estate, funded by my father's inheritance. And unlike Joey's fabricated empire, my ventures were steadily and genuinely successful, so much so that his fake real estate king persona paled in comparison. That's when I devised a plan, something that would protect his fragile pride while also safeguarding my secret business. One night, I suggested it to him. I know your business is struggling. If you'd like, I can use my assets to help you. Then I continued, I'll establish a corporation to manage my investments, and you can be its representative, the CEO. Publicly, you'll appear to have rebuilt and expanded your empire as the great real estate king. That way, your pride remains intact. Joey clung to my proposal as if it were salvation itself, like a drowning man grasping at a miracle. Tracy, you're my goddess, he cried, clutching me with tears in his eyes. And from that day on, he eagerly played the role I had written for him, the young real estate king, on the stage I had constructed. Of course, the contracts he signed spelled out everything clearly. All assets remained under my name, and in the event of divorce, he had no rights whatsoever. The lavish lifestyle Joey flaunted on social media after our marriage was entirely financed by my assets. Yes, I allowed certain expenses, designer suits, business class flights, because they served as operating costs for his role as my figurehead. But that was all he was. A rented actor, an empty figurehead, strutting across a stage I had built. The true foundation of those assets came from two things: the inheritance my father left me, and the knowledge I had taught myself since college about real estate investment. My father had always seen my strength with numbers and my cautious, deliberate nature. Before he died, he told me, Tracy, keep this from Kristen. She'll destroy herself chasing short-term greed if she ever gets her hands on something like this. He drilled into me the principles of asset management, almost like royal training. After his death, I stayed true to those teachings, avoiding extravagance, and steadily built my fortune brick by brick. I stayed out of the spotlight not only because I disliked attention, but also because, as my father warned, success attracts vultures. Joey never imagined that he was nothing more than a scarecrow I used to protect my empire. Blinded by the intoxicating taste of borrowed success, he had long forgotten about the contracts he signed. Now, as I revealed the truth, both Joey and Kristen sat frozen, their mouths agape. I continued, "Do you know why I never stood in the spotlight myself? Because the more successful you appear, the more hyenas swarm, sniffing out the scent of money. I was sick of it." Then I locked eyes with Joey. "Joey, you did have charm. But you had one fatal flaw, your vanity. You couldn't stop yourself from exaggerating, from pretending to be more than you were. I thought I loved even those weaknesses, those human flaws. But at the same time, I realized I could use them." Joey turned his gaze away from me. "That's why I offered you the role of being the glamorous face of the empire I had built. You stood in the spotlight, boasting of success to the world, while I quietly held the real power behind the scenes. For you, it was a no-risk chance to claim the glorious title of successful man. For me, it was freedom from distractions, so I could focus entirely on business. I thought it was the perfect win-win arrangement." Joey's face twisted in despair. Mr. Watson, my brilliant attorney, carried on my words with icy precision. "Joey, the contract you signed makes this perfectly clear. This partnership is contingent solely on the continuation of your marriage to Tracy. Once that marriage is dissolved, you are immediately stripped of your position and forfeit all rights to the company's assets." I looked down on the two of them, utterly defeated, and delivered the final strike. "So here's the truth, Kristen. The man you betrayed your own sister to steal, the one you staked your entire life on, isn't a real estate king. He's an unemployed, penniless figurehead who now owes me hefty compensation payments. You thought you had grabbed the world's most dazzling diamond, but in reality you've clutched a mud-stained pebble buried in debt, smiling as if it were treasure." At that moment, when she realized all hope was gone, Kristen snapped. She turned on Joey, the same man she had once whispered love to, and began striking his arm with a furious, almost demonic rage. "This is all your fault. Every last bit of it. You kept bragging, 'I'm a real estate king,' didn't you? You useless man. You fraud. Give me back my life." The conference room turned into a grotesque theater of betrayal, echoing with screams and insults. I simply sat there, watching it all in silence. What am I supposed to do now? I trusted you. I even betrayed my own sister for you. Kristen sobbed. But Joey, pale and hollow, no longer found her appealing. With a voice emptied of all pride, he spat back. "Shut up. I have nothing left. You only wanted me for my money anyway." "Of course I did. Do you think anyone would want a shallow, empty man like you if you weren't rich?" Like beasts fighting over scraps, Kristen clawed at him, shredding his expensive designer suit. I simply watched, quietly, shielding little Nicole's ears in my arms. And then I rose, delivering my parting words. "You two really are perfect for each other. Stay on that hollow stage you've built and keep performing your pathetic little play for the rest of your lives." In the end, Joey was literally thrown out of my home with nothing but the clothes on his back. All that remained to him was the mountain of debt his vanity had created. But 3 months later, as I exited my company building, I spotted a familiar figure lingering by the lobby. Drenched from the rain, in a worn coat, stood Joey, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. When he saw me, he approached hesitantly. "Tracy," he murmured, voice weak, stripped of all confidence. "What do you want?" "There's nothing left for us to discuss," I said coldly. But he apologized deeply. "I truly wronged you. You were right. I lived off your wealth, but more than that, I took advantage of your kindness. I wasn't a king, I was an empty shell pretending on top of what you built. It wasn't just Kristen. I betrayed you, Tracy, as a person. Tears glistened in his eyes. This wasn't an act. It looked like genuine regret. For a moment, I held his gaze, then answered softly, I accept your apology. But that's all. Your life is your own. Never appear before me or Nicole again. That is the only atonement left to you. I left him standing there in the rain and stepped into the waiting car. In the rearview mirror, his small figure remained, hunched and broken, but I turned my eyes forward. Since that day, I haven't had any contact with Kristen at all. Until one day, my mother came to my house, her expression heavy. Tracy. It's about Kristen. She's pregnant with Joey's child. She went on to explain that Kristen had resolved to raise the baby alone, her savings exhausted, living in hardship in a rundown apartment. She brought it on herself, I replied, my words colder than ice. My mother only lowered her eyes in sorrow. Months later, my mother told me Kristen had given birth safely to a baby boy. She is now struggling as a single mother, overwhelmed by childcare and the cost of survival in that shabby apartment. It was only after enduring the life-threatening ordeal of childbirth that Kristen finally realized the true weight of her sins. The moment she held her son in her arms, trembling with love and awe, she must have imagined me, enduring the same pain to bring Nicole into the world, at the very instant she had chosen to inflict her most brutal betrayal. That realization shattered her completely. And from then on, Kristen's relentless stream of apologies began. My voicemail soon filled with broken apologies, so choked with sobs they were barely words. Again and again, Kristen's voice pleaded, Tracy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never realized how foolish, how cruel I was, until I had this baby, until I went through it myself. I don't expect forgiveness. But please, just let me apologize. Each week, my mailbox held long letters, stained with TRs, the ink blurred. They contained nothing but raw, unadorned words of regret. But my heart did not move. I deleted the voicemails without ever listening to them. I threw away the letters without opening them. That betrayal had cut me with a wound too deep, one no apology could ever heal. My mother, however, loved both my daughter Nicole and Kristen's son equally, cherishing them both as her grandchildren. And I could not deny her that. Tracy, she finally understands the foolishness of what she did. Yes, what she did was unforgivable. But her baby is innocent. Whenever my mother tried to defend Kristen, I only shook my head quietly. I know, Mom, but I will never reconcile with Kristen. I won't let her disturb our peace ever again. My resolve was unshakable. That betrayal had scarred me beyond repair. Even so, I said nothing when my mother occasionally visited Kristen to see her grandson. And on those days, I sometimes handed her an envelope. Use this as your own money, Mom, to help with the child's expenses. But don't ever tell her it's from me. My mother would nod with a sad expression, yet with a hint of relief. I will never forgive Kristen. But her son, my nephew, should never have his future ruined simply because of the circumstances he was born into. It isn't sympathy. It isn't forgiveness. It is, perhaps, the last responsibility I feel as a family. As for Joey, I only hear of him through acquaintances. They say he drifts between day labor jobs, crushed by debt, hiding in a cheap apartment. The brilliance he once flaunted is gone, and he still suffers under the ghost of the massive debts born from his vanity. Now, beside me, my daughter Nicole sleeps peacefully. Looking at her angelic face, those harrowing days feel almost like a lie. Today, I live not only as a true businesswoman of wealth, but above all as a mother, peaceful, fulfilled, and genuinely happy.